Okay, class, let's go over our test 1-1 review. Okay, I want to go over each one of these questions explaining how to do the process. Okay, we know this test review is going to cover mixed numbers and decimals, and they're all going to be mixed up. So you have to know your rules. Okay, so first problem that we have is a multiply fractions and mixed numbers. Well, we know in order to do that we must have fractions. We have to have our fractions. Okay, so we're going to take this, and this 2/3, it's a fraction, but the 3 1/4 is not, so we've got to make it a fraction. So I leave my 2/3 alone, and then to change the 3 1/4 into a fraction is, I know I have to use the popcorn method. So 4 times 3 plus 1 back over the 4. So 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13 over 4. Now at this point, you've got two options. You can do what our wrap says, to multiply fractions. I know I got them. It's top times top and bottom times bottom, then simplify. So if you do that, you end up with 2 times 13, which gives us 26, over 3 times 4, which gives us 12. Now, another thing that you could do, if you remember, is that if you have numbers inside, on top, and on bottom that have common factors, you can simplify that. So one way is you can multiply across and then simplify the 26 over 12, or you could simplify the 2 by dividing it by 2 and turning it into a 1. And dividing the 4 by 2 and turning it into a 2. So now when I multiply across, I get 1 times 13, which I know is 13. And then 3 times 2 is 6. So that's the same thing as dividing each of these by 2 over here. You'd get the same thing. And now since it's improper, we now have to divide. Okay, this is top in, bottom out. So we ask ourselves, how many times does 6 go into 13? It goes 2 times. So 2 times 6 is 12. So I take 12 out of the 13, and I'm left with 1 over 6 as my final answer. Now, number 2 is an addition of decimals problem. And we know to add decimals, I must line my decimal up. So I rewrite 14.928. And then I take the 2.4 and I write it around my decimal point. So I like putting the decimal in first and then writing the 2 and the 4. We can add in some placeholders right here if you want to. You don't have to do that in addition, but it is a good practice. Okay, so now we add. 8 and 0 make 8. 2 and 0 make 2. 9 and 4 make 13. Carry your 1, bring the decimal down. 4 plus 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. And then we bring the 1 down. So we end up with 17.328. Now number 3 is a division of fraction problem. So we've got to divide fractions. Don't ask why. Flip the second and multiply. So the first one, we leave alone. We don't mess with it. The second fraction, though, if it's already a fraction, I just flip it over. 4 over 3, and then turn it to multiply. And now we go to multiply fractions. I know I got them. It's top times top and bottom times bottom. And then simplify. Or you can try to simplify within the problem. You'll notice here I've got a 4 and a 6. I can divide each of those by 2. And then when I multiply, I end up with 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 3 is 9. And then I simplify that. And you'll notice that I could have just divided the 20 and the 18 by 2 and come up with 10 over 9. And now it's an improper, so I do 9 goes into 10 one time. 1 times 9 is 9. I subtract. 10 take away 9 is 1 over 9. And 1 1/9 is my final answer. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so number 4, it's a subtraction. So we've got a whole number. So we need to remember that in a whole number, the decimal's at the end. So we got 30 point, and then I write this one around my decimal point. So 1872. Now in subtraction, you must add your placeholders. Okay, so we add our placeholders in there, and now I'm ready to subtract. So I come all the way over to the 3 to borrow. 3 turns into a 2. This 0 turns into a 10, which is a 9, 10, 9, and 10. So now I'm ready to do my subtraction. 10 take away 2 gives me 8. 9 take away 7 gives me 2. 9 take away 8 gives me 1. And I already brought my decimal down. And then 2 take away 1 is 1. And we end up with 11.28. Number 5, we're back to a multiply problem with fractions. Now how do I turn a whole number 7 into a fraction? You just put a 1 underneath it. Okay, and then for 2 2/3, I do the popcorn method. 3 times 2 is 6. 7, 8 over the 3. And this one I look for ways to simplify, but I don't have a number on top and a number on bottom that can simplify, so I just multiply across. 7 times 8 is 56. 1 times 3 is 3. And now we divide. So this is one of those where you may actually need to go to the side and do 56 divided by 3 and do your top in, bottom out. How many times does 3 go into 5? 1 time. Get 2 left over, bring your 6 down. 3 goes into 26 8 times to get 24, and you get 2 left over. So our answer is going to be 18, and the 2 on the leftovers goes as the numerator, and the 3 goes as the denominator. So 18 2/3. Now we have a multiply decimal. Well, we know to multiply decimals, we just take our numbers, write them down as though the decimal point is not there. Okay, so then I go back and put in my decimal so that I don't forget them. So this number's got 2 numbers to the right of the decimal, and this number's got 1 number. So in my final answer, I'm going to have 3 numbers to the right of my decimal. So now we just multiply as normal. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 3 is 21. Write the 1 down, carry the 2. 7 times 2 is 14. 15, 16. Move over a spot for our 0 here. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 3 is 18. And then 12 and 13. And now we add. 7, 7, 14. 3, 1, 3, 4, 5. And then bring your 1 down. So we end up with 1, 5, 4, 7, 7. Now we got to take care of the decimal. I'm going to have 3 numbers behind the decimal because I had 3 in my problem. So my answer is 15.477. Okay. Next 3 questions. Okay, now we're back to addition. Now in addition, we've got to find common denominators for adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So I like to rewrite my problem so that I can find my common denominators. Now I've got 4 and 5, so I go through my multiples of 5. 5 times 1 is 5. Can I turn the 4 into a 5? No. 5 times 2 is 10. Can I turn the 4? No. First one we come across is 20 that they have in common. Okay, so now I ask, how did I go from 4 to 20? Well, I multiplied by 5, so I do the same thing to the 3 and get 15. How did I go from 5 to 20? I multiplied by 4, so I do the same to the top and get 8. So now we add our tops. 15 and 8 make 23. We keep our denominator, and then we add our whole parts. 1 and 3 make 4. Now, since we've got an improper fraction right here, we've got to do top in, bottom out. How many times does 20 go into 23? 1 time. So that 1 goes into the 4, and it becomes a 5. So I take 20 out of the 23. I'm left with 3/20. So I end up with 5 3/20. Now for division of decimals, we know that the first number goes in the house. So 15.6, and I'm going to divide by the second number. Okay. Now I can't divide by 1.3, so I take this decimal and I move it 1 place to the right, which is the same thing as multiplying by 10. And if I do that to one number, I must do that to the other number as well. And then I bring my decimal up. And now we divide as normal. 13 goes into 1, 0 times. 13 goes into 15, 1 time. We subtract, we get 2 left over, bring our 6 down. 13 goes into 26 2 times. You get 26 with a remainder of 0. So I get an answer of 12. Okay. Now I have subtraction of mixed numbers. So just like on problem number 7, I've got to find a common denominator. So here I write 3 fraction bar minus 1 fraction bar. With 7 and 5, the first number that they have in common is 35. And one way to always find a common denominator is just multiply them together. So what did I do to 7 to turn it to a 35? I multiplied by 5. So do the same thing to the top and you get 15. 5 times 7 gave me 35, so I multiply the 2 by 7 and I get 14. So now when I subtract, 15 take away 14 is 1. Over keep my denominator, and 3 take away 1 is 2. So I end up with 2 and 1/35. Okay. Now 2 more questions and then we're done. Okay, so for the word problems. It says Martha is cutting a piece of cloth for a project. The piece of cloth is 10 feet long and she cut off 6 7/9 feet. How much cloth is left? Okay, so if we're cutting off, that means it's a subtraction problem. So we've got 10 take away 6 7/9. Okay, now this is one of our subtraction with borrowing problems. I don't have a number up here, so I've got to find one. I've got to get a fraction up there. So where do I get it? I get it from the 10. So the 10 becomes a 9. Okay, and then the fraction that I have here has to be equivalent to 1, but has to have a 9 on, be a fraction with a 9 on the bottom. Okay, so I put the common denominator. Well, in order for that number to be equivalent to 1, I've got to have the same number on top and on bottom. So now 9 and 9/9 is the same thing as 10. But I now have a fraction I can subtract 7/9 from. So 9/9 take away 7/9 is 2/9. And then 9 take away 3 or 6 is 3. So we got 3 and 2/9 feet. Okay, so there is my answer. And don't forget your label. Last question, toughest one. Sarah likes to ride her bike. Friday she rode 2 1/4 miles. Saturday she rode 3 4/5 miles. And Sunday she rode 1 2/3 miles. How far did she ride in all? So the how far did she ride in all means I'm going to add them all up. So 2 1/4 plus 3 4/5 plus 1 2/3. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can work 2 of these fractions and then add the third one in, or just do all 3 of them at the same time. That's the way I choose to do this one. So since they all have different denominators, I do have to find a common denominator. Now, with 4, 5, and 3, okay, the easiest way to find those is just multiply them together, to be real honest. Okay, so if I do 4 times 5 is 20, times 3 is 60, that will be a common denominator. And what you find out if you go through the multiples of 5, the first one that all 3 of them have in common, it is 60. Okay, so now the nice thing about multiplying all 3 of them together is what did I multiply this 4 by to turn it into a 60? Well, I multiplied it by a 5 and by 3. So 4 times 5 is 20, times 3 is 60. So what did I multiply by? I multiplied the 5 by the 5 and the 3, which is 15. Okay, so if I multiply this by, if I multiply the 4 by, what did I multiply the 4 by to get it to a 16? I mean to a 60, I multiplied by 15. So I multiply the top number by 15 as well. So 1 times 15 gives me 15. So what did I multiply the 5 by? Well, I multiplied it by the 4 and the 3, which is 12. So I multiply this top number by 12 and get 48. Well, what did I multiply this 3 by to get 60? I multiplied it by the 5 and the 4, which is 20. So I multiply the 2 by 20 and get 40. So now I add it all up. So I've got 15, 48, and 40. When I add all that together, I end up with 103. And then I put that over 60, and then I add my whole parts. 2 and 3 make 5, plus 1 is 6. And now I simplify this. Well, how many times does 60 go into 103? 1 time. So we put that 1 into the 6, and we get 7. I take out 60 out of this 103, and I'm left with 43 over 60. And we look at our label, and it's miles. So 7 and 43/60 miles is the total amount that she walked. So we've just looked at adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing decimals and mixed numbers. And that's what your test is going to be over. Until next time.